My name is Demar Bias, born and raised here, former employee of the city of Pontiac, engaged with multiple nonprofits in Pontiac and just in terms of giving back. Definitely glad that Pontiac United stepped up to the plate to do this mayoral candidate forum so we can have some informed voters. Like, this is an important time in our city. We're getting to a good stride of synergy and growth, and the mayor position is going to be incredibly important. So tonight, we thank Tim Greimel for being our first guest up. And Tim, you can introduce yourself and give you a chance to give a brief background before we go to the questions.
Well, thank you both so much, Jasmine and Damar, and many thanks to Pontiac United for hosting the event and for everything that Pontiac United does throughout the entire year. I really appreciate all of your service. My name is Tim Greimel, and I represented Pontiac for 5 years as Oakland County Commissioner, and then for an additional 7 years as state representative. Before I was in the State House, I worked as a labor and civil rights attorney representing employees who were discriminated against in the workplace. And during my time as an elected official, both at the county level and the state level, I proudly fought against the emergency manager and many of the things he was doing to our city. But I was also able to get some really positive things done for Pontiac during my time in the legislature. And 4 of my years in the legislature, I served as the House Democrat, the leader of Democrats in the State House in Lansing. And during that time, I led the successful effort to expand Medicaid coverage to cover 700,000 Michiganders who didn't have health insurance before that, including many, many thousands right here in Pontiac. I also secured $500,000 in state funding for a job training program through WOLSA here in the city of Pontiac. And I successfully extended millions of dollars in funding for school-based health centers, including a couple of centers right here in Pontiac, including at Pontiac High School, Pontiac Middle School, and at one of the elementary schools here in town to make sure that we're delivering healthcare services, physical healthcare services, and mental health care services in a way that's accessible to students. I'm excited about running for the position of mayor of Pontiac. We have an opportunity to really bring together our community, unite us together, and make sure that we're moving forward, expanding economic opportunities to Pontiac residents, and also making sure that we're delivering city services that Pontiac residents deserve.
Yes, thank you so much for that. So let's get into this without further ado. I will begin with a question from our email account that was sent in from a citizen, Angelina. Please state one specific, although you said a few things just now, tangible thing you have done during the pandemic, March 2020 to present, to help the citizens of Pontiac.
Yeah, it's a really important question, and obviously the COVID pandemic has been devastating to all communities, but especially for communities like Pontiac that were already struggling with food insecurity, with poverty, and with a real health crisis brought on by racism. The devastation was particularly acute here, and I tried to do my part, along with many, many others here in the community, to try to alleviate some of the hardship that the COVID pandemic brought. Right out of the gate, back in April of last year, April of 2020, right after COVID hit, I volunteered with Pontiac Meals on Wheels to deliver food to healthcare workers at St. Joe's Hospital and McLaren Hospital. I also worked and donated diapers to the Baldwin Center in the city. I volunteered with the NAACP to unload thousands of bottles of water at Monument of Faith Church. I volunteered with the Pontiac Housing Commission around Thanksgiving to hand out meals that were prepared by Uncle Jerry's Barbecue to families in need here in the city. I partnered with e-community outreach services to donate diapers to families in need around the holidays, around Christmas time. And I also volunteered with Black Youth Votes Michigan, the the National Coalition on Black Civic Participation, Oakland Forward, and also to deliver household supplies and care boxes to families in Pontiac. The last thing I would mention is that just a couple months ago, I volunteered free legal services to a family here in Pontiac that got behind on their rent during the COVID to make sure that they were able to stay in Manhattan along the route facing the eviction. And these things are important because people have been hurting for many years here in the city, but particularly during the COVID pandemic. And it's incumbent on all of us to roll up our sleeves, get to work in a very hands-on way, and try to improve the quality of life for everyone here in the city.
Thank you for that response. You have done a lot, it seems like. Thank you. Damar, were you able to find a question from the live feed?
Not a live feed, but I do have a question. Tim, to you, it's no secret that over the years there hasn't been much synergy between the mayor's position and city council. Just want to see your outlook on that, and how do you have a tangible plan going in on how to try to bridge that gap?
Well, it's a great question, Damar, because nothing is going to really get done at City Hall. The city is never going to move forward unless we have collaboration. And that collaboration is critically important between the mayor and city council. It's also essential between city government as a whole and the broader community. When I'm mayor, I'm going to promptly inform city council members of new developments, new information. It's important to treat them as equal partners. Nothing can get done by the mayor alone. Nothing can get done by city council alone. It's critical that they partner and collaborate, and I'm committed to doing that. But we've also got to partner and communicate with residents, with civic organizations, with the faith community, with local small businesses. And I've been able to do this in some of my past positions. When I was a county commissioner, county government was dominated by Republicans. So we had a lot of diverse views there. And as a Democrat, I didn't agree with my colleagues on many issues. Same when I was a state representative. The governor was Republican. Most of the legislature was Republican. But I was still able, by collaborating with people and finding common ground when possible, and don't get me wrong, we're not going to agree on every issue, but city council mayor have to seek common ground, and if they can't find common ground on one issue, they've got to move forward and find common ground on the next issue. And that's how, when I was county commissioner and state representative, I was able to deliver tangible improvements and results. And I'll just give you a few examples. When I was a county commissioner, we established a microloan program that was able to provide affordable loans to small businesses throughout the county, including many right here in Pontiac, so they could start up their business or grow their business and succeed. We established in the days before the Affordable Care Act, we established an innovative healthcare program so that the lowest income families here in Oakland County could get access to healthcare. We established a dental discount program so that families could better afford dental care. And when I was a state representative, I mentioned the expansion of Medicaid coverage to over 700,000 Michigan residents, including many thousands here in the city. I mentioned the fact that I secured $500,000 in funds for a job training program here in Pontiac. But as I also mentioned, we were able to establish these school-based health centers. What I didn't mention is that we also established the Healthy Kids Dental program in the state so that every child 18 years and younger can get free dental care. And that's essential so that low-income families that are struggling, can get access to the care that they need. And I was able to do that as a Democrat in very difficult political environments. And the key, again, is collaboration and trying to find common ground at every opportunity. I will treat City Council as true partners and treat the community as the true partners that everyone here in Pontiac is and should be treated as such.
Very good. Thank you for that response. I have another question for you. This question is from Dave, age 52, District 1. He asks, how will you encourage corporations like UWM to do more outreach and collaborations with local businesses and offer jobs to citizens? And what are your plans to encourage more multi-million dollar companies to come to our city?
Yeah. Well, it's a really important issue because yes, we need to bring investment and jobs to Pontiac, but doing that in and of itself is not nearly enough. It doesn't do any good to bring jobs here if they're filled by outsiders. So we need to make sure that we're ensuring that more of those jobs are filled by Pontiac residents, number one. And I have a few plans to make sure that that happens. Number one, the city needs to really step up to the plate and do more with workforce development in partnership with the county and the state to ensure that more Pontiac residents have the skills needed to fill positions. Number two, the city needs to do a lot more in terms of job placement. That means hosting job fairs in partnership with a number of employers. It means working with individual Pontiac residents and individual employers to connect people with job openings. And we have some businesses here in the city. The person who sent in the question mentioned United Wholesale Mortgage. I think some of these companies want to do a lot more for the community. They're eager to do a lot more for the community. But the city has not stepped up to the plate and made these asks of them. And it's essential that the mayor and the city government approach these companies and make specific, tangible asks of them so that they can deliver results and opportunities for Pontiac residents. United Wholesale Mortgage did recently provide notification COVID vaccination, and that's important. But there's a lot more that they're interested in doing and that they can do. And I'm determined to make sure that we're approaching companies that are located in Pontiac and making those specific asks of them in terms of job creation, in terms of job training, in terms of job placement, and making tangible asks for various improvements and investments in public spaces and parks and youth recreation and the school district. One of the things I feel very strongly about is that whenever the city uses city tax incentives or city tax abatements to bring investment and jobs here, the city must require that that company fill a certain percentage of its jobs with Pontiac residents. If city taxpayers are generously giving tax breaks, the least companies can do in return for that is to make sure that a representative number of Pontiac residents get a fair opportunity to work at these establishments. So we need to put those requirements in place, and we need to put accountability measures in place around them so that if companies don't end up delivering, that those tax incentives will be clawed back by city government, results in profits.
Gotcha. So basically, ask, and you shall receive.
And the other part of the question was about attracting. I think it's really important that we not lower our standards. We should have high standards. Companies that are looking to invest here and grow here. But the city does have a responsibility to be very clear about what those standards are, to be transparent. What companies and businesses want is certainty, they want predictability, they want to know what's expected of them, and they want to be able to navigate City Hall in a way where they can quickly and efficiently get the approvals they need. So we need a one-stop shop at City Hall so that there's one specific desk that businesses can go to, and they'll be very, very clear on exactly what the requirements are, what the permits are that are required. They'll help businesses walk through those steps and make the applications. But we've got to make it as efficient and quick as possible while maintaining high standards so that we can cut unnecessary red tape and make it easier for those who want to invest in doing jobs to Pontiac to do so.
Okay, so a part two to my original question is you answered this well about what would happen with council, but I think one more dynamic that the city is facing is school district. It's two separate entities, but yet again, it's hard to recruit businesses who want to have employees live in the city without a strong school district. So I think that we know it's two separate entities, but how do we bridge any gap there?
Yep, really, really important issue. You're absolutely right, but it's tough to to keep families living here in Pontiac. It's tough to attract businesses to Pontiac without improving the local school district here. As you mentioned, DeMar, the fact of the matter is that the city government does not control the school.
Right.
The school district is run by its own elected school board. However, and this is the important part, I think there are lots of opportunities for the city to partner with the school district to improve learning and education for kids here in the city. And I'll give you some examples of that. Number one, the city really should be partnering with the school district to facilitate more after-school tutoring programs and after-school extracurricular programs to give kids something to do. And in that regard, the city has been generating $900,000 a year in taxes through the youth recreation village, but does not have much to show for it. The one youth recreation center that was established in the far southwest corner of the city is difficult for many young people who don't drive to get to. And there's no bus transportation there. There's no dedicated transportation. We need to do more to expand opportunities for youth by locating youth recreation programming throughout the city. And one of the easiest ways to do that is to partner with schools, with churches, or with other facilities that already exist, and then invest the youth recreation village dollars into providing youth recreational programming at those facilities. And that we should be expansive and think big when it comes to what recreation means. Certainly sports and athletics are important, and providing fun avenues for kids is important. But we also need to think of youth recreation programming in terms of enrichment programs, art, music, after-school tutoring, quality early childhood education programs, coding and computer programming classes. We should use youth recreation to make sure that we're providing enriching experiences for our young men and young women in this community so that they can live up to their full potential. Another second example of partnering with the school district is making sure, and I touched on this, which is early childhood education opportunities. Studies have shown very clearly that if young people are given high quality early education opportunities before kindergarten, that investment pays off 7 or 8-fold later in life when those young people are more likely to be economically successful, more likely to stay out of the prison pipeline, more likely to not end up on welfare or other public assistance. So investing in early childhood education is absolutely key. And the third area I would emphasize is workforce development, including vocational education. Vocational education, making sure that we're partnering with businesses in the community, labor unions, and others to provide skill training for young people in partnership with the Pontiac School District, so that kids, not everybody's going to go to college, and we need to make sure that those kids who may not be on a college track get the skills they need to fill good paying jobs. And there are plenty of good paying jobs out there where people work with their hands. We just need to make sure that in partnership with the school district, Oakland Community College, and others, that we provide the vocational and opportunities necessary to make that a reality.
Thank you. We got word that there were some audio issues. So if you don't mind, could you quickly do an overview of what you said as far as bringing larger companies to Pontiac and a couple of the things you've done in the city thus far?
Yeah, absolutely. So number one, can folks hear me better this time? I want to make sure that.
Right.
Okay, good. So a couple of things, and you've asked a couple of questions, Jasmine. In terms of bringing companies and investments to Pontiac, it's important that we maintain high standards, but we also need to cut unnecessary red tape and streamline the process for businesses. We should have a one-stop shop at City Hall, so business people who are looking to come to the city or who are already here and looking to expand operations can go to one specific place and be told all the permits that they need to acquire, what the process is, and where they can ask questions and be walked through the process.
Again, we need to maintain high standards, but we also need to make the process as efficient as possible. One of the things that I mentioned is that anytime the city uses tax credits or tax abatements, city tax credits or city tax abatements to bring investment and jobs here, the city must require in a binding way that those companies who are getting those city tax abatements and city tax credits fill a certain percentage of their jobs with Pontiac residents. It doesn't do any good to bring jobs here if they're all filled by outsiders. So stepping up, holding companies accountable for hiring Pontiac residents is essential. And the city needs to do its part through workforce development programs and job placement programs to make sure that we're preparing and positioning Pontiac residents to fill those jobs. In terms of what I've done in the past for the city, during my, I was going to jump right to my role as state rep, but I'll repeat also some of the things that I did as a county commissioner. When I was an Oakland County commissioner, I led efforts to establish the Oakland County Microloan Program, which was established to make sure that the new businesses that are just starting up operations or existing businesses that are trying to grow could get access to the loans they need to be successful. And many businesses right here in Pontiac have taken advantage of that program. I'll mention that I feel strongly that we need to establish a Pontiac-specific microloan program. And that can be done in partnership with nonprofits, with foundations, much like the county has done at the county level. But we really need a program that's focused specifically on small Pontiac businesses, fostering entrepreneurship among young people here in Pontiac. That includes financial literacy classes, includes entrepreneurship classes, making sure that people understand how to put together a business plan, how to go out and seek funding, and what kind of way to go about effective marketing as well. When I was also at the county, we also established, and this was in the days before the Affordable Care Act, we established a very innovative healthcare program so that many of the lowest income families here in the county could get access to healthcare. We also put in place the dental discount program to provide up to 40 or 50% discounts for low income families in Oakland County to get access to the dental care that they need. When I was a state representative, I was the House Democratic leader, and I led efforts to establish the Healthy Michigan program, which expanded Medicaid coverage to over 700,000 Michigan families, including many, many thousands right here in Pontiac. I secured $500,000 in funding for a job training program right here in Pontiac through OLSA. And I also renewed and secured the renewal of millions of dollars in funding for school-based health programs, including one at Pontiac High School, one at Pontiac Middle School, and another at an elementary school in the city. Those school-based health programs are designed to make sure that young people in those schools can get direct access to the health care they need, both physical health care and mental and behavioral health care. The other thing I did was that the majority of Republicans were trying to take away one of our judgeships here in Pontiac without any justification. I'm very proud that I was able to block those Republican efforts to take away one of our judges here. So those are just some examples of some of the things that I fought for successfully here in Pontiac as both the county commissioner and as a state representative. I also, even before I was in the state legislature, as a county commissioner, I appeared before a committee in Lansing and testified against their efforts to put in place a new emergency management law. I was never shy about going toe-to-toe against the emergency managers in the city and fighting tooth and nail against a number of the things that they did to this community. And I promise that I will always fight for Pontiac residents.
Thank you for your response. Damar, were you able to get the question from the live feed at all?
Yeah, I just actually got one inbox to me. So the question is, in regards to big corporation development, would you support a community benefits agreement or a community benefits ordinance attached to any development?
The short answer is yes. I think anytime that city tax credits, city tax abatements, city tax breaks are given to corporations, we need to ask things in return from those corporations. As I mentioned, that could be making sure that a certain percentage of the jobs there go to Pontiac residents, which is perhaps the most important thing we can do to expand economic opportunity for Pontiac residents. But there are other possibilities as well that could fall under the community benefits arrangement as well, including investment in parks and other public spaces here in the city, making sure that roads around the development are being repaired. So I'm open to a number of specific things. The important thing is that we have to make those asks and demand that corporations do those things if they're getting city tax breaks, city tax incentives. And then we've got to make sure that we actually have in place ordinances that will hold companies accountable to actually deliver on those promises and on those commitments.
Thank you once again. This should be a quick question just to make sure we get the most out of our time here with you, Tim. Where do you stand on marijuana dispensaries within the city?
Well, it's very important that we immediately, as soon as possible, issue licenses for medical provision centers. The people in this community spoke loud and clear when a vote was taken almost 3 years ago now, that they approved not just medical marijuana provisioning centers, but also grow facilities and other things. And here we are almost 3 years later, and not a single license has been issued. That's completely unacceptable. As a result of that, the city has forgone hundreds, maybe thousands of jobs that would have been created. The city has missed out on likely millions of dollars in tax revenues that would have been generated over the past 2.5 or so years. But also, a lot of other development in the city has been stalled as owners of properties across the city have been waiting on various development decisions for their property to see if they get a marijuana license. Because if they get a marijuana license, they're going to go in that direction. If they don't get a marijuana license, they're going to look at alternative development opportunities. And so this almost 3-year delay issuing licenses has stalled a lot of other development in the city. The final problem is that the city is almost certainly going to get sued by applicants, especially those who don't end up getting licenses, who are going to use this terrible delay in the issuing of licenses as a reason to sue. But the other thing I would say is that once we get medical marijuana licenses issued, which is long overdue, we have to be prepared for the next step. Adult use marijuana is coming. It's coming to the state as a whole. It's already come to a number of communities. It's going to come in all likelihood to Pontiac. And it's important that we get out in front of that and have a plan for how we're going to allow a pathway to adult use for medical marijuana facilities so that we can get out in front of it and make sure that it's done in the right way.
All right, this should be another quick question. This one is from Claudette in District 1. She asks, do you think that it's important to have our own fire department?
Well, I do. Ideally, we would still have our fire department. One of the things that I've talked about fighting against the emergency manager, one of the decisions of the emergency manager that I did fight against was his decision to disband the Pontiac Fire Department and to contract with Waterford instead. Now, it's not going to be easy to get a fire department back because, of course, the emergency manager sold all the equipment and fire engines and other essential items to operate a fire department. So we need to look at our options moving forward. Obviously, the two most important things in looking at what is actually feasible and what we can do moving forward is what's best in terms of services for residents, which means reducing response times. And there are really two components to that. There's the fire department component, but the city is also contracting with private EMS services to respond, ambulance services to respond to people who are having heart attacks in their home or other health issues that don't involve a fire. And so we need to look at how we're going to reduce response times and make sure that when people call 911 because there's a fire in their home or someone's seriously ill, that services and help shows up promptly and in time to be of assistance. as part of contracting with the Waterford Fire Department, a couple of fire stations were closed here in the city. That certainly did not help response times because in many instances, fire trucks had to come longer distances to get to the scene of a fire. We certainly need to assess whether it's feasible and affordable to bring our fire department back into Pontiac. That's the other component. It's about reducing response times, making sure that help's there when it's needed, but we also obviously have to make sure it's affordable for the city. So when I get into office, I'm going to make sure that we do a full assessment of the budget. I've publicly supported a forensic audit of the city. We're going to make an assessment of where the budget stands, and we're going to look at all options when it comes to a fire department. That's going to be particularly time sensitive because the existing contract with the Waterford Fire Department expires in just the next year or two. And so we're going to be faced with, do we stay with Waterford? Do we bring it back in-house, which is ideal if we can afford it and if it'll reduce response times? Or the other alternative would be partnering with another neighboring community. We certainly should not allow Waterford to hold us hostage and act like that's our only option when it comes to the delivery of fire services.
Demar, did you have anything?
Yeah, my question is, and this is a question I'm going to ask every candidate. Very short question. What's your why?
Yep. So the reason I'm running for mayor is pretty straightforward. We have a storied history here in the city of Pontiac. Pontiac has been the county seat of Oakland County for over 200 years. It's where the first Black woman in Michigan purchased real estate. It's the city that helped put the world on wheels and invented the muscle car. And yet today, we don't even have a proper grocery store in our city. We don't have an all-purpose community center. We have aging senior citizen centers that haven't been modernized or updated in decades. And the people of Pontiac deserve every bit as high a quality of life as those in surrounding communities. And yet, city government has been letting them down. My longtime friend and mentor, Hubert Price, used to say that Pontiac is the center of the universe. And while it may not have necessarily been the center of the universe, it was certainly the center of Oakland County. And yet today, we've seen other communities move forward, improve the quality of life for their residents, while Pontiac residents have been left behind. And despite all of the great efforts and successes that I was able to achieve at the county commission and state level representing the city, I also recognized that we were never really going to move forward and provide the government and city services that Pontiac residents deserve without change in city government. And so that in a nutshell is why I'm running. We've got to make sure that Pontiac reclaims its rightful place. It's the heart and soul of Oakland County, and that Pontiac residents finally get the city government that they deserve.
Thank you for that. This is an interesting question. This is from Joan District 7. She asks, how are you going to address the slumlords who don't live here that are renting out their properties to anyone and not taking care of those properties?
Yep. This is actually a big issue, a big problem in the city. And I think there are two approaches we need to pursue in order to hold slum landlords accountable. Number one, the city needs to more aggressively enforce city codes. That's true when it comes to landlords who aren't properly maintaining their property, but it's also true of other commercial establishments that aren't properly maintaining their property either. Number two, we need to empower tenants by making sure that they know their legal rights, making sure that they have access to affordable attorneys by partnering with legal aid societies, legal aid groups, and making sure that they have access to the courts. If we can empower tenants to stand up for themselves, that alone will help hold landlords accountable and make sure that they're providing the habitable residences and appropriate living quality that they're required by law to provide. So it's both on the city directly to enforce codes, but it's also about empowering residents, tenants, so that they can stand up for their rights. I'll note that I've been involved in these efforts over the years. As both a county commissioner and a state representative, I have gone to bat for residents in Section 8 housing. I've gone to landlords. I've had meetings with owners of a number of these complexes, and I have gotten them to invest millions of dollars into various facilities. That was the case when one place was suffering from bed bugs. We made sure to hold the landlord accountable so that he invested to clean that mess up. But it's also true in other situations, just to modernize and invest in basic infrastructure, making sure that residents are safe, making sure they're living in healthy environments, making sure that mold is addressed, making sure that equipment and appliances and toilets and showers are updated in these homes. And so I've never shied away from reaching out directly to owners, directly to landlords, and holding their feet to the fire to make sure we get results for them.
Okay, I just got inbox another question, Tim. It comes from Kano Phillips. Do you have a plan in place to address the recidivism dynamic in Pontiac? Part two, do you have any planned programs or partnerships in place that may help them bridge this gap?
Yeah. So we need to do a lot more here in Pontiac when it comes to this issue. This is a real serious problem, not just here in Pontiac, but across the country. And it's really important that when people re-enter society after serving their time, that they have every opportunity to succeed. And unfortunately, we see all too often that employers close doors to opportunities for people who have done their time and paid their debt to society. And of course, what happens when people find themselves in that situation with opportunities close to them, it just makes it much more likely that they go back to a life of crime if that's the only avenue that's left available to them. And that's obviously the definition of recidivism. We need to make sure that we're expanding opportunity for people so that we reduce that recidivism rate. And I think there are a few ways to do that. There are a number of prisoner reentry programs out there. But the city really has not stepped up to the plate like it needs to partner with those programs and make residents aware of those programs. Secondly, there are foundation dollars out there that are available. To my knowledge, the city hasn't even applied to receive to make sure that we're providing housing and other wraparound support services for people who are just getting out of prison and reentering the community. And third, we need, when it comes to some of the employment opportunities that I've talked about in terms of requiring companies that receive city tax breaks or city tax incentives to hire Pontiac residents, we should make sure that they're hiring a number of people who are re-entering society from prison. And in a similar vein, we need to make sure that we're supporting small businesses here in the community by giving a preference for city-based businesses in city contracting policies. And as part of that, we should make sure that we're doing outreach and extending every opportunity to businesses owned by those who have come out of prison. So this is not a situation where there's an easy single solution to address it. But I'm glad, Kano, you raised the question, and it's really important that we come at this from a number of different angles to expand economic opportunity and needed services for people as they re-enter society.
Thank you for that response. We have a question here. How do you feel about the way the city has handled the Phoenix Center?
Yeah, well, it's been a very hot topic in the city, and the most tragic thing about it is that the entire situation was created by the emergency manager when he decided that he was going to try to tear down the Phoenix Center, and he knew or should have known that Ottawa Towers have these easement rights entitling them to parking in the Phoenix Center. And yet the emergency manager plowed ahead with this lawsuit that has ended up costing the city many millions of dollars in attorney fees, but also millions and millions of dollars in terms of settlement costs. And that dragged on for 9 years. So 2 of those years were under the emergency manager, 7 years were under the current administration, and it's been a colossal waste of city resources. The city ended up entering into a really burdensome bad settlement a couple years back with Ottawa Towers, and that in large part is because the city continued to push forward despite losing case after case at the lower court level and at the Court of Appeals. And the city continued to plow forward, which meant that Ottawa Towers had more and more claims for attorney fees, more and more claims for losing out on tenants because it didn't have access to parking. And so the city really dug itself a deep hole, ultimately entering into, as I said, this really terrible settlement agreement. Then the city decided to, in order to try to get out from under that onerous settlement agreement, to buy Ottawa Towers from the owners and then sell them to a private owner. And that is what has occurred. And I think in broad concept, that makes sense. In order to get out from this terribly onerous settlement agreement, it was actually less expensive for the city to buy out the owners of the Ottawa Towers and then sell the Ottawa Towers to private investors. However, there have been a number of details around that I'm concerned about. Most notably, there was a provision in the original agreement that would have required the city to guarantee a private loan of more than $6 million, such that if this private investor defaulted on that loan, the city and its taxpayers would have been on the hook to repay more than $6 million. I brought that concern to the attention of City Council and the mayor at the end of December, and I'm happy to say that the mayor later said that she had addressed that problem with revised agreements. So at this point, I think the key is moving forward, working with the new owners, making sure that we're ensuring that the Phoenix Center really benefits everybody in the community. We've got to make sure that the amphitheater reopens, that we're sponsoring events, that the community has access to the public space there, and that we're bringing entertainment to downtown Pontiac and making downtown the destination for both Pontiac residents and neighborhoods, but also those from around the county and around Metro Detroit to come and enjoy everything that downtown Pontiac has to offer.
Okay, I just got sent another question. How do you feel about the current public transportation option in Pontiac, and how can we increase those options?
Yeah, well, it's a really important question, and I touched a little bit on this when we talked about youth recreation opportunities, because one of the problems with the existing facility is that it's tough for young people to get there. But more broadly, it's tough for a lot of people to get from their home to work. We generally have a broken public transit system throughout Southeast Michigan, throughout Metro Detroit. But here in Pontiac, we need to make sure that we're investing more into the targeted services that Pontiac residents need. And there are hundreds of thousands of dollars available through both SMART community credits as well as state transportation credits that the city could really direct where these funds go. But because the city hasn't stepped up to the plate and directed how these funds should be used, SMART has just been putting these funds into default programming and increasing to a limited extent existing bus routes. If the city steps up to the plate and shows the leadership that it should, it could harness these hundreds of thousands of dollars and create unique services that are specifically tailored to address the needs of Pontiac residents. And that will be one of the first things I do when I become mayor.
We have another question. It is, how would you solve the city's affordable housing crisis without opening the door for gentrification?
Yeah. Well, it's a really important point. And one of the most important ways to make sure that we're not displacing existing Pontiac residents, that current Pontiac residents will always have a place here in the city and will continue to be able to live in their existing neighborhoods. In other words, to avoid gentrification that pushes out existing residents, the most important thing we can do is ensure that housing options are affordable for those residents so that they're not priced out of the housing market. And I would say a few things in terms of how to accomplish that. Number one, the city needs to partner with the Michigan State Housing Development Authority to make sure that we're pursuing a high quality, affordable housing. There are lots of state dollars available for that. There's foundation dollars available for that. And the city has not been engaged in that space the way that it needs to. The other thing that I would say is whenever the city uses city tax credits or city tax abatements to bring housing developments to the city, a certain percentage of the units in those housing developments must be set aside. The city, again, needs to do this in a way that's enforceable for moderate income, low income residents and families. That's the way that we make sure that if newcomers come to the city, they don't displace existing residents. We have to make sure that every Pontiac resident continues to have a place here in the city and continues to be able to stay in the neighborhood that they currently reside.
DeMar, did you have anything?
Let me see if it's one more question that came through. No, that was the same question she actually sent me. So at this time, Tim, if there's anything else you want to say to the public, you want to give them your contact information, and that way, if it's something or another question that they may have, they can reach you directly, and you open up that door of communication for you.
Well, absolutely. And I encourage people to reach out to me. The best way to reach me is using my cell phone number. And I've represented Pontiac, as I mentioned, for 12 years at the county level and the state level. And I've always handed out my personal cell phone number. I'm going to hand it out again right now. It's 248-425-7525. I'll repeat that. It's 248-425-7525. That's my one and only cell phone. And I encourage people to call, to text, not just to ask questions, but to actually provide feedback and suggestions. Effective leadership is not about telling people what they need in their life or elected leaders imposing their views on residents. Effective leadership is about collaboration. It's about working with residents, partnering with residents, and making sure that we're amplifying the voices of everyday people in the city. And so I want to hear from you about what concerns you have. I want to hear from you about what suggestions you have to solve some of the challenges our community faces. So please don't hesitate to reach out. And again, my cell phone number is the best way to do that, either via text or by calling. Please, I'm always happy to talk with you, always happy to meet with you. It's essential if we're going to move this community forward and bring people together that we work together. And that's why I always try to make myself as accessible as possible. I really appreciate, again, the opportunity. So many thanks to Pontiac United. Many thanks to you, Jasmine, and you, DeMar, for hosting this. I really enjoyed the conversation. So thank you for everything you're doing. The last thing I would note is that I do have a very detailed policy platform on my campaign website. And that's important because, I think there's always a concern on the part of voters and residents that an elected official is saying one thing to one group of people and another thing to another group of people. So this is a transparent way to make sure that everybody in the community sees what I stand for. And I encourage you to visit the website, look at my policy platform. You'll see all of the things that I've been discussing this evening reflected there. And that's because that's where I stand on these issues. And it's there for the world to see. The website is www.greimelforpontiac.com. Now, my last name is a really unusual last name and hard to spell, so let me spell that for you. It's www.greimel, that's GREIMEL, for, spelled out, FOR, Pontiac.com. So I encourage people to check out the website, and then if you have any questions or suggestions, please reach out to me. I always make myself available. Thanks again for the opportunity this evening.
All right. Thank you for your time, Tim.
Thanks.
We're kind of going to close out here. I'm not sure what Jasmine has to say, but I definitely want to thank Pontiac United for the opportunity. And, of course, we have to thank our host of hosts, Asante Samuel, F&G Media Arts Company. He put this feed together, got it very professional. We appreciate it. And this is just day one. We get a chance to meet these candidates one by one and have some informed voters making decisions in the primary elections.
Yes, thank you so much. And be sure to tune in to our next Meet the Mayoral Candidates Q&A session. It will be Wednesday, May 12th, 6 p.m. Thank you all, and good night.